The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Marcus Vega knelt in the mud, his hands deep in the black soil surrounding the rose beds at the Thornhill estate. His fingernails were caked with dirt, his work boots were falling apart at the seams. Sweat mixed with rainwater ran down his weathered face, carving rivers through the grime on his skin. He was 53 years old, and every muscle in his body screamed with exhaustion. But he didn't stop working. Behind him, through the enormous glass windows of the mansion, billionaire Victor Thornhill stood watching. Victor's jaw was tight, his eyes were cold. He had been watching Marcus for 20 minutes, and with every passing second, his disgust grew deeper. Victor was a man who valued perfection. Everything in his world had to be polished, precise, and pristine. His suits were handmade in Milan, his cars were waxed weekly, his marble floors reflected the chandeliers like mirrors, and yet every time he looked outside, he saw Marcus, dirty, disheveled, disgusting. Victor turned to his assistant, Jonathan, who stood beside him holding a leather portfolio. "That man is a disgrace," Victor said, his voice laced with contempt. Jonathan glanced outside. "Sir, he's been working since dawn. The storm damaged the gardens badly. He's trying to—" "I don't care what he's trying to do," Victor snapped. "Look at him. He looks like he crawled out of a sewer. This is the Thornhill estate, not a homeless shelter." Jonathan said nothing. He had learned long ago not to argue with Victor Thornhill. Victor walked to the window and tapped the glass with his knuckle. Marcus didn't hear it. He was focused on saving the hydrangeas that had been uprooted by the wind. "Get him in here," Victor ordered. "Now." 10 minutes later, Marcus stood in the grand foyer, dripping rainwater onto the white Italian marble. He kept his head down, his hands clasped in front of him. He knew better than to make eye contact with Victor Thornhill. Victor descended the spiral staircase slowly, each step deliberate. He stopped 3 feet away from Marcus, close enough to smell the earth and sweat on him. "Do you know why I hired you, Marcus?" Victor asked, his voice quiet but sharp. "No, sir," Marcus said softly. "I hired you because you came highly recommended. My friend said you were the best gardener in the state, that you could make dead soil bloom." Victor circled him slowly, like a predator sizing up wounded prey. "But I didn't hire you to turn my estate into a mud pit." Marcus's throat tightened. "Sir, the storm—" "I don't want excuses," Victor interrupted. "I want results, and what I see every single day is a man who looks like he sleeps in the dirt. I've been working extra hours to repair the damage from—" "You're filthy, Marcus," Victor's voice rose. "You track mud everywhere. You smell like wet dog. You embarrass me in front of my guests." He leaned in closer, his breath hot on Marcus's face. "How can I trust a man who can't even keep himself clean to maintain my property?" Marcus's hands trembled. He wanted to defend himself. He wanted to explain that he had been working 16-hour days to restore the gardens after the storm, that he barely had time to eat, let alone shower, that his water had been shut off at home because he couldn't afford the bill after sending every spare dollar to his son's college tuition. But he said nothing. Because men like Victor Thornhill didn't care about explanations. "You're fired," Victor said flatly. The words hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. "Sir, please," Marcus's voice cracked. "I need this job. My son—" "Your son?" Victor laughed, a cold, ugly sound. "Let me guess. You're going to tell me some sob story about how you're supporting your family, how you're struggling, how life is so hard." Marcus's eyes filled with tears, but he refused to let them fall. "Everyone has problems, Marcus," Victor continued, "but I don't pay you to bring yours to my doorstep. I pay you to make my gardens beautiful, and you've failed." "I haven't failed, sir," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. The gardens are alive, the roses are blooming, Enough? Victor held up a hand. Pack your tools. Leave your keys on the table. You have 1 hour. Victor turned and walked away, his expensive shoes clicking on the marble. Marcus stood there, alone in the foyer, feeling the weight of the world crushing down on him. He had just lost everything. 3 days later, Victor was hosting a dinner party for some of the city's wealthiest investors. The dining room glittered with crystal and gold. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The guests laughed and sipped champagne, worth more than most people's monthly rent. Victor was in his element. He stood at the head of the table, telling a story about how he had just fired his incompetent gardener. The man was an absolute disaster, Victor said, gesturing with his wine glass. Looked like he'd been rolling in pig slop. I couldn't have someone like that representing my estate. The guests murmured in agreement, nodding along. You did the right thing, Victor, one man said. Standards matter. Victor smiled, pleased with himself. That's when the doorbell rang. Jonathan, the assistant, appeared in the doorway, looking uncertain. Sir, there's a young man at the door. He says he needs to speak with you. It's urgent. Victor frowned. I'm hosting a dinner, Jonathan. Tell him to make an appointment. He says his name is Daniel Vega. The room went silent. Victor's smile faded. Vega? He says he's Marcus Vega's son. Victor set down his wine glass slowly. His guests watched with interest, sensing drama. Send him in, Victor said. A moment later, a young man walked into the dining room. He was in his early 20s, tall and lean, with his father's dark eyes and strong jawline. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a faded jacket, and work boots caked with mud. But there was something in his posture, in the way he held his head high, that commanded attention. Mr. Thornhill, Daniel said, his voice calm but firm, my name is Daniel Vega. You fired my father 3 days ago. Victor leaned back in his chair, amused. Yes, I did. And? I came to tell you that you made a mistake. The guests gasped. No one spoke to Victor Thornhill like that. Victor's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You fired the best gardener in this state because he looked dirty, Daniel continued, but you never asked why he looked that way. I don't need to ask, Victor said coldly. A professional maintains standards. My father worked 16-hour days to save your gardens after the storm, Daniel said, his voice rising. He didn't eat, he didn't sleep. He gave everything he had to make sure your roses bloomed and your hedges stayed perfect, and you fired him because he had dirt on his hands. He was an embarrassment, Victor shot back. No, Daniel said, stepping closer. You're the embarrassment. The room erupted in whispers. Victor stood up, his face flushing with anger. Get out of my house before I call the police, Victor said, his voice shaking with rage. I'll leave, Daniel said. But first you need to know something. I don't need to know anything from you, Victor spat. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the table in front of Victor. What is this? Victor asked. Open it, Daniel said. Victor unfolded the paper. His eyes scanned the document. His face went pale. It was a land deed. That's the deed to the land your mansion is built on, Daniel explained. It was owned by my great-grandfather, Miguel Vega. He sold it to your father 40 years ago for a fraction of its value, because your father promised him that his family would always have work here. That promise was part of the original sale agreement. Victor stared at the paper, his hands trembling. My father honored that agreement, Daniel continued. He worked here for 20 years. He made your gardens the most beautiful in the city, and you threw him away like garbage." "This doesn't mean anything," Victor said, but his voice lacked conviction. "It means everything," Daniel replied. "Because that deed also contains a clause. If the Thornhill family ever breaks the employment agreement with the Vega family, the land reverts back to us." Victor's jaw dropped. "You're lying," he whispered. "I'm not," Daniel said. "My father never told you because he's a good man. He didn't want to hold it over your head. He just wanted to work. But you didn't just fire him, Mr. Thornhill. You humiliated him. You broke a 40-year-old promise, and now legally this estate belongs to my family." The guests sat frozen, their champagne glasses forgotten. Victor looked at the paper again. His lawyer had reviewed the original sale documents years ago, but no one had noticed the clause. It was buried in the fine print, a handshake deal between two men that had been long forgotten. Until now. Victor Thornhill spent the next 2 days locked in his office with his lawyers. They pored over the deed, searching for a loophole, anything that could invalidate the clause, but there was nothing. The agreement was ironclad. Miguel Vega had been a clever man, and he had made sure his family would always be protected. Victor had 2 choices: reinstate Marcus Vega and honor the original agreement, or lose his estate. On the 3rd day, Victor called Marcus. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Hello?" "It's Victor Thornhill," Victor said, his voice tight. "We need to talk." An hour later, Marcus and Daniel stood in Victor's office. Victor looked older, smaller, diminished. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by something else: shame. "I made a mistake," Victor said quietly. Marcus said nothing. He simply waited. "I judged you unfairly," Victor continued. "I didn't see the work you were doing. I only saw the dirt." "Dirt is part of the job, Mr. Thornhill," Marcus said softly. "You can't grow anything without getting your hands dirty." Victor winced at the metaphor. "I'm offering you your job back," Victor said. "Double the salary, full benefits, and a formal apology." Marcus looked at Daniel. His son nodded slightly. "I'll come back," Marcus said. "But on one condition." "Name it," Victor said. "You work with me for 1 week," Marcus said. "In the gardens, with your hands in the soil. I want you to understand what it takes to make beauty grow." Victor stared at him, stunned. "You want me to work in the dirt?" Victor asked. "Yes," Marcus said simply. Victor looked at his expensive suit, his manicured nails, his polished shoes. The idea of kneeling in the mud was repulsive to him, but he had no choice. "Fine," Victor said through gritted teeth. The transformation. The next morning, Victor Thornhill knelt in the dirt beside Marcus Vega. His hands were clean, his clothes were pristine. He looked ridiculous. Marcus handed him a pair of gardening gloves and a small shovel. "We're planting roses," Marcus explained. "The soil needs to be loose. You have to dig deep to make room for the roots." Victor jabbed the shovel into the ground half-heartedly. "Deeper," Marcus said. Victor tried again. The shovel hit a rock. His hands stung from the impact. "This is absurd," Victor muttered. "This is work," Marcus replied calmly. For the first hour, Victor complained. His back hurt, his knees ached, the sun was too hot, the dirt was too dirty, but Marcus didn't respond. He just kept working. By the second hour, Victor stopped complaining. He was too exhausted. By the third hour, something strange happened. Victor noticed the way Marcus handled each plant with care, the way he spoke softly to the roses as if they could hear him, the way he smiled when a new bud appeared on a stem. "Why do you love this so much?" Victor asked, genuinely curious. Marcus paused, wiping sweat from his brow. Because plants are honest, Marcus said. You can't fake growth, you can't buy it. You have to earn it. You have to give them time, water, sunlight, and patience. And if you do it right, they reward you with something beautiful. Victor looked at the rose bush in front of him. It was small, fragile, barely alive. What if it doesn't grow? Victor asked. Then you try again, Marcus said simply. Failure is part of the process, but you don't give up. Victor stared at the plant. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to nurture something. The unthinkable truth. On the final day of the week, Victor and Marcus were working side by side in the garden when Daniel arrived. He was carrying a large envelope. Dad, Daniel said, I need to show you something. Marcus stood up, brushing dirt from his hands. Daniel opened the envelope and pulled out several documents. I've been going through Great-Grandpa Miguel's old papers, Daniel explained, and I found something. He handed the documents to Marcus. Marcus read them slowly. His eyes widened. What is it? Victor asked, standing up. Marcus looked at Daniel, then at Victor. The land deed, Marcus said quietly. It's not just about the employment agreement. What do you mean? Victor asked, his heart sinking. Miguel Vega didn't just sell the land to your father, Marcus said. He invested in your father's first business. He gave him the capital to start Thornhill Industries. Victor froze. Without Miguel Vega, Daniel continued, your family would have nothing. Your father built his empire on my great-grandfather's investment. But Miguel never asked for credit. He never asked for repayment. He just wanted his family to have work and dignity. Victor felt his legs weaken. He sat down on the ground, not caring that his expensive pants were getting dirty. I didn't know, Victor whispered. No one did, Marcus said gently. Miguel made my father promise never to tell anyone. He said a man's worth isn't measured by what he takes credit for, but by what he gives without asking for recognition. Victor looked at Marcus, this man he had judged so harshly, this man whose family had quietly built the foundation of everything Victor owned. I'm so sorry, Victor said, his voice breaking. Marcus knelt down beside him. You don't need to apologize to me, Marcus said softly. You need to apologize to yourself. You forgot where you came from. You forgot that every empire is built on the backs of people who work with their hands. Victor nodded, tears streaming down his face. What do I do now? Victor asked. Marcus smiled. You keep working, Marcus said. You keep learning. And you remember that dirt isn't something to be ashamed of. It's where everything grows. Victor Thornhill stood in front of the Thornhill Community Garden. It was a massive project, 10 acres of land in the heart of the city, transformed into a free, public garden where anyone could come to plant, grow, and learn. The grand opening ceremony was packed with people, families, children, elderly couples, all of them eager to get their hands dirty. Victor stood at the podium wearing jeans and a work shirt. His hands were calloused now. His nails were permanently stained with soil. 10 years ago, Victor began, his voice steady, I was a man who valued perfection over people. I believed that wealth meant cleanliness and that dirt was a sign of failure. The crowd listened intently. But a man named Marcus Vega taught me the truth, Victor continued. He taught me that the most beautiful things in life grow from the soil, that hard work leaves stains, and that those stains are not a mark of shame, they're a badge of honor. Victor gestured to the garden behind him. This garden is named the Miguel Vega Memorial Garden, Victor announced. In honor of the man whose vision and generosity made everything I have possible, and it exists because of his grandson Marcus, who refused to give up on a bitter, broken billionaire." The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus Vega stood at the edge of the crowd, his son Daniel beside him. He was older now, his hair completely grey, but his eyes were bright with pride. Victor stepped down from the podium and walked over to Marcus. "Thank you," Victor said, extending his hand. Marcus shook it, smiling. "You did the work," Marcus said. "I just showed you where to dig." Victor laughed, a genuine, warm sound that he had forgotten how to make. As the sun set over the garden, children ran through the rows of vegetables, their laughter filling the air. Parents knelt beside their kids, teaching them how to plant seeds. And Victor Thornhill, the billionaire who once valued perfection above all else, knelt in the dirt beside a young boy, showing him how to make something beautiful grow. Because he had finally learned the truth. You can't build anything real without getting your hands dirty. And the people you underestimate, the ones covered in mud and sweat, are often the ones who hold the keys to everything you thought you owned. Victor had lost his arrogance, but he had gained something far more valuable. He had gained his humanity.